Good morning. I'm Billy Taylor. I'm the artistic director for jazz for the Kennedy Center, and I'm really proud to have had so many friends respond to my invitation to be on this particular panel. This is about working opportunities to women, or for women, and this panel and all of the panels that we're doing this week, the other two panels, I'd really like to dedicate to the memory of a woman that I admired greatly. She was supposed to be with us, but unfortunately she passed away, Miss Helen Keane. Now, Helen was the source, this is very personal for me, was the source of great envy for me because she managed Bill Evans. And Bill never had to do anything because she's such a great manager. He never had to do anything but show up. I mean, she did everything that was supposed to happen for this artist, for his records, for all of the things. She was not only a very lovely woman, but one who really took care of business in every sense of the word. So this panel, of course, is dedicated to her memory. And I hope those of you who don't know about her will read up on her because there have been some things written about her. And she's the kind of person that I refer to whenever I talk about the business of music, because she did everything. She was a record producer, she booked, she planned, she really thought very seriously about the career of the artist. And he wasn't the only artist she managed, but she thought very seriously about what was best for that artist and really made it happen. So that's really what we're hopefully talking about today. I'd like to introduce to you the members of the panel, and I'm not going to say a lot about them because I'm going to ask questions so that they can tell you in much greater detail what they're really about. Nina Freelon is a wonderful vocalist that I've had the pleasure of working with on many occasions, and she has really done a lot of things for herself, even though she now has a manager. Many of the things that have made her career have brought her career to where it is now are things that she kind of conceived and made happen. So she's a person that I think has a great deal to add to this particular panel. This lady on my right, Patty Tyler, is someone who is doing a festival which is probably the best city festival anywhere. I mean, the Chicago Festival really is well thought out. It's done, it brings major artists. It does all of the kinds of things that really have outreach into the various communities in Chicago, plus the jazz community. So she has put a lot of thought into that aspect and many other things that she does, and she'll tell you a little about that. A lady that we're going to honor a little later in the week is one that I have admired for the more years than either of us want to talk about. She really decided that she wanted to be active in the jazz field, and she went away and studied the business aspects of jazz. She developed, she uses a list, a mailing list better than anybody I know. I mean, she's really a master of how to get people to understand that something special is going to happen. And there are many other aspects to what she's done. She has, among which are helping to establish an international women's organization. But she'll tell you about that. Kobe Narita. Some years ago, I was playing the piano for a singer at the Village Vanguard. And at that time, the lady on my left was married to the owner of the Blue Note record company. And talk about a super salesman. Now this was, she came to a club that was really, it was jazz because the owner loved jazz, but he also loved cabaret. He loved many things, and so it was kind of a mixture of jazz and cabaret and all kinds of exciting things that were showbiz. Well, she came down and convinced this guy that he should have Thelonious Monk to play. Now, nobody had ever heard of Thelonious Monk at that time, and she convinced him that he should have Thelonious Monk. She was so convincing that ultimately he married her. So, Lorraine Gordon. And On many occasions, you know, we all need managers, and we all need someone to get us jobs. And I'm really delighted because I finally met someone who's given me a whole lot of work. And along with a lot of other musicians, I'd get these calls from this lady with this nice voice to say, look, what are you doing on July the 24th, or what are you doing? So I said, nothing. Say, okay, I got a job for you. And they were always great things which just suited just what I did. And so it's always interesting to me when you have a person who is not just an agent, not just someone who's going to book you because the phone rang, but who's going to say, well, this is the kind of thing that this particular artist could do well. It would be good for the artist, it'll be good for the presenter. And that takes a very special talent. And so Laurel Wicks is a person who does that very well. Having introduced you to the, just briefly, to the panel, I'd like each one to say a little about their concerns about working opportunities for women in jazz, and really to tell us to intersperse that, if they would, with the things that they're doing, because each one is adding something very special to the field. And I guess I'll start with Lorraine.
Thank you. Oh, well, I wanted to just say all those wonderful things you said about Helen Keane. I wanted to add one more, that she was my very, very good friend, and we were coming down here together, and I saw her the Saturday before she died, but she did all those great recordings of Bill at the Vanguard, and I treasure all of them. Her name is on the back. And the other thing, I'm so honored to be here because Mary Lou Williams was one of my great favorites, and she played the Vanguard twice. 1949. And I'm just thrilled that her spirit hovers over this wonderful meeting. So, me, well, it's early in the morning for me. I'm not used to this hour, and this is what daylight looks like. It's nice. Except it's wet. But Max, my husband, Gordon, who had the Vanguard, 61 years old this year. Well, he died in '89, but rather than let the Vanguard disappear, I thought, why not try and keep it alive? I did have a lot of experience without playing any instrument, by the way, just an ear for music, and I've always loved jazz all my life. And as Billy said, it started back there in my teens, and Thelonious was one of my great idols, as well as so many other musicians. Nevertheless, I did take the Vanguard over and had to learn from the ground up, beside just sitting there in the audience in years past, because I had nothing to do with it except to listen. Max was, he was a one-man band. He did everything. And so I did learn and try, and some failures, but mostly all good happenings. And I've had many wonderful women play at the Vanguard. See one right there, great bass player, played with Ruth Brown. And I hope to do more and keep trying. Jerry Allen, who's here, has been there. Oh, well, I don't want to go through a list of names. It's very long. But I'm still listening, and I know it's tough for women to get jobs. And I notice most of the women that I do deal with are pianists, vocalists. Just had a flute player recently, though. That was a departure. But I just learn every day as I go, and the Vanguard is thriving. It's terrific. I think it's still there because I'm here. I left it with my daughter. And I can't tell you more than that, except I hope you'll all come there and visit me someday. All of you women, we'll have a women's night. That would be great.
What would, if someone who you didn't know wanted to work there, what would they have to do? How would they go about it?
Well, they'd have to see the landlord first and lower the rent. But you know, things aren't the way they used to be in the early days. When Max opened the Vanguard in 1935, well, rent was nominal. There weren't all the things you have to pay, the city tax, state tax, sales tax, government. I mean, liquor, oh God. There is so big an overhead in running a club that you really can't be as venturous as you want to be. And we try to keep the prices low because we know jazz lovers don't have a lot of money, and try to not go overboard. But it's not easy to break in today, especially not in the Vanguard, because over the years it has acquired a reputation, and people respect the club. They don't even really care who's playing. They know it's going to be someone good.
Right.
Many times they don't even ask who's playing. They just say, give us a reservation. And they're rarely disappointed. But I just find it a little more difficult today to start someone off cold. Now, Max did that. You know, he had Miles Davis or John Coltrane. You know, Thelonious. Oh, and Thelonious played the Vanguard. Nobody was in the room. Sure. In those early days. And Max said, come here, you. What have you done to me? You're ruining my business. I said, shh, wait, Max. He's a genius. You'll see. Many years later, I hear Max on the side saying to people, you know, he's a genius. But you could do it in those days. Today, I'm a little more cautious because the overhead and the upkeep is immensely high. But nevertheless, I do it. If it's someone I love, and it's a very personal business, I really have to be enthralled myself, because I sit there every night listening, and I have to enjoy what I'm hearing. And if the customers are with me, that's terrific. But it's not as easy as it was, if that's an answer.
Let me tell you another side of that story. When Thelonious Monk played the room, as I said, I was playing for a singer, so it was just piano and voice, and people assumed, because of the nature of the club, that that was the show. So when Thelonious Monk came on, they thought that was dance music. So people would get up and try to dance. There was a dance floor there. They'd get up and they'd try to, well, no. And they'd go sit back and they'd call Max. They said, Max, who is this? And they said, it's Thelonious Monk, he's a genius. They said, okay. And she worked well.
Over well.
Nina Freelon, now you have done what many of us try to do, and that is taken your own career in hand and said, there's certain things I'd like to do, and naturally you go and try to make those things happen. How have you gone about it?
Well, I live in a small southern town, medium-sized southern town. It's not a jazz mecca at all. But when I was at the very, very beginnings, when I was just feeling my way and finding out what I really wanted to do with my life, I was blessed to have a community of people who were very supportive. There was a person in the community who owned a record store who trained my ear. I knew Nancy Wilson's music, but he said, listen to Little Jimmy Scott. He said, listen to Donna. He took me back from what was in my ear to the roots. And that was very, very important. And I became a person possessed almost, on fire, hungry for the music. And that fueled my inner drive to decide that I wanted to make this a career. I looked on this list and I saw that I'm listed as a vocalist. And I wished that in some ways that I could just call one thing and say that's what I am, but I've written down some other things that I am as well. I am also a songwriter, and I'm also a band leader, and I'm also an educator, and a publicity person, and a songwriter, and a mother, and a daughter, and a wife, and a granddaughter, and a sister, and an aunt, and I think, and a sound technician, and a baggage handler, and I think it's very important. I don't think any of us gets to do just one thing. And I've been blessed. The tune Stolen Moments is my mantra, is my theme, because that's how I had to craft my career. I didn't have the blessing to have uninterrupted time to work on my craft. I stole a moment here when a child was sleeping, when there was an opportunity to do something. It made me very, very focused, because I knew I didn't have hours and hours to practice. I learned how to sing very softly while children were sleeping and stay on pitch. I also, before I had a band, I learned how to have rehearsals by myself. You know, when you have only 1 gig a month, you can't get people to come and rehearse with you. And when you do have a rehearsal, it better be at your house and you better have some food. Because, you know, it's difficult. Find a babysitter, find someone to take over for you while you're doing something. But I firmly believed, and had the support and help of my husband, that this was the life. I am able to say who I am in this world through this music. It's very, very precious to me, very precious. It's something I can't not do. But I realized I had some things that were not necessarily going for me. I lived in a small place. And I realized that I had to reach out to people and network. It was very important that I do that. Dr. Billy Taylor was one of the first people that I reached out to when he came to do a clinic sponsored at Duke University. And it takes a lot of guts to go up to somebody of that stature and say, hello, I'm a singer, you know, when you probably only know 20 tunes. You know, but he was adjudicating a session for some local musicians, and I had to, you know, the woman who dreamed the dream of sitting here today talking about her life is not the same person who dreamed the original dream. Something about going through the process of 13 years has transformed me into someone who could actually handle the experience. And that, I think, is important. That's why your dreams and your goals are so essential, because you will get there. When I signed a contract with Columbia Records, no one was interested in managing me until after the ink was dry. So a lot of the things, networking, speaking with people that were a little further along with me, soliciting help, staying in contact with folks, writing letters, letting people know what I'm doing in my life, what I'm working on, what I'm striving for. All of those things were very, very important. And I found that musicians generally were willing to help, willing to offer words of encouragement, advice, tell you what to listen to, what to read. And that, you know, I've had the help of Dr. Billy Taylor. I've had the help of Ellis Marsalis. When I went to Jazz in July, I met Fred Tillis, Dr. Boyer, Dr. Yusef Lateef. All these people have become a part of my life and a part of my success. Very early on, when I had no money and people would come into town, I didn't have the $20 for the ticket. I would volunteer to pass out programs at the door so that I could get backstage or carry bags or bring water to the artist or whatever, just so I could get close enough to say, I love your music and I'm trying to do this too. People respect that. And they generally, I mean, I've had a couple of experiences that weren't entirely positive, but they were very, very few. Usually, and I'm keeping that in my heart because people come to me now and ask me the same thing. I'm always open, I'm always trying to make that time because somebody made the time for me. I get a lot of calls and letters from vocalists and musicians who say, I can't get a gig. I can't get enough work. You have to really create opportunities for yourself. And that includes, you know, we think of improvisation and creativity on the bandstand. It has to expand and involve your entire life. So when my children were very young, my life was school and community. And my grandmother always said, grow where you are planted, which means take the talent that God gave you and infuse it into the life of where you are. So I found myself performing in schools and then writing grants so I could get paid to perform in schools. At first, there wasn't money, but as I began to develop, I became a magnet that attracted a financial reward for my efforts. And I really do believe at the very base of everything, you're talking about energy. Financial energy, human energy, spiritual energy. And as you develop, you will begin to attract, I mean, look around at your peers, the people who are your peers, the people who are in your life, tell you where you are. And if you can look in your life and see people like Dr. Billy Taylor and Ellis Marsalis, then you know you're on the right track. If you find yourself in a situation where you're the best, quote unquote, the strongest person around, then it's time to reach a little further and get some help. It's not good to be the best in your own little small pond. It's good to have something to reach forward and some people that you can help as well. So I hope that answers some of the questions.
We're going to have some questions from the audience in a moment, but I would like to go through the panel. Thank you very much, Nina. One thing, though, in terms of, you mentioned in passing, one thing that you do is rehearse, you learn to do is rehearse a group. How do you rehearse a group?
How do you rehearse a group?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing is to have a plan so that time isn't wasted. And have the plan hopefully given to the musicians, which tunes you're going to do. If you have a gig coming up, that kind of puts a focus on it that you're trying to prepare for something in a space and time. But there are also those rehearsals where you're just trying to amass material. And so those are two different kinds of things. But when we are preparing for a gig, it's the material that we are trying to do in that performance that we're running over to get smooth, to look for any kinds of kinks or look for a way to make the show flow. And then there are rehearsals that are just plain working sessions where everyone may bring something that they'd like to work on. I have a drummer who has a lot of different patterns that he likes to work out. And that creative energy gets me inspired and interested. And sometimes writing some beautiful music comes out of those kinds of sessions. But I find you have to have some kind of a structure as well. It can't always be hoping that the miraculous will happen. You know, having a structure is really important, knowing what you're going to work on and working on those things.
Thank you. Kobe Narita, you have been doing some very interesting things in addition to the things we all know about. What are you into at the moment?
Well, the main thing that I'm working on now, in addition to the Universal Jazz Coalition, is helping on the organizing of the International Women in Jazz. Now, that name was picked by the membership, International Women in Jazz. The whole purpose is to create performing opportunities and to teach them all the things that Nina already knows and that you all know. And if I say it, you're going to say, she knows I know that. But anyway, teach them all the things that go with being in performance, getting a gig, starting from press releases, networking, building your own mailing list till you're well enough known that you don't need the mailing list to count on your friends. Using every mailing list of everybody in your group, all of these things the women are learning, and you'd be surprised. They've been working, some of them have been working a number of years and they don't do this, none of it. And so the work is in the organization is progressing because every woman that comes to a meeting listens to everything that goes on, thinks of a good idea, gives the good idea, and I say, okay, you got it, develop that idea, bring it to the next meeting. So about 40 women out of our 200 current membership are working on something that they'd like to see come into fruition. And the first thing that we did was a series at St. Peter's because we meet there. So we do a series once a month. They gave us once a month, the last Saturday, a Sunday of the month. And we do something important there. You have to have, I have a theme. I give awards. I love to give awards. And we have about 50 women we want to honor, but we have to do it in segments. The first 16, my, that took a long time to do in that program. But in the program, we also use someone big. Everyone big helps. Dr. Billy Taylor has been one of the people that I've always gotten help from. Mary Lou Williams, she was at the first Women's Jazz Festival when Casablanca, the original Birdland, closed the doors on us, and we had catered in food. And where was Mary Lou? She was sitting on an overturned crate, calmly eating her rice and beans and fried chicken and listening to the music in the middle of the street. We set up in the middle of the street. But you have to create your opportunities. You have to take advantage of everything, and communication, networking, I deeply believe in. And that's what I do with Collective Black Artists, with Universal Jazz Coalition, now with the International Women. Everywhere I go, I leave a jazz series. The first time I went to the Schomburg, I had them bring in a good sound engineer. When I went over to Miller, they had to bring in the good sound equipment and the sound engineer. Everywhere I go, Flushing, we created a new jazz series, and Billy Taylor's on that advisory committee. But everyone who was anybody immediately said, yes, I'll help. And so everywhere you go, you just have to create opportunities for the young following behind you. A lot of you are working, but Virginia, for instance, Virginia Mayhew, knows how hard it is to make a name for yourself, and she's done everything right, and she's working a lot. And and Carlene, everyone knows how hard it's been for them, and they're ready, they're always ready to talk to the young. And that's what I do. I work with the young, so I can't tell you anything new. I wanted to mention about Helen Keene, too, a friend for many, many years, a brilliant woman. And she had all these famous people, Paquito, Joanne Barkeen, Art Taylor. She had all these famous people she works for. And I mean, she worked. And then I would say, Helen, I have 10 young students here. I want to bring them to you for a business in jazz session. Come on up. I'd bring them over. Then she would take 3 hours to talk to them. 3 hours, and she wasn't even paid hardly a nickel. I mean, she was given something from the school, Pete Yellen's Brooklyn, whatever the college is called, Brooklyn College, I guess. And but she was a marvelous woman. I just wanted to say that too, in addition to what everyone else has said.
Kobe is, for your knowledge, one of those people who really puts her money where her mouth is. She has had all these opportunities to do things, but whenever you're in a not-for-profit situation, as she is, it's very difficult to continually raise money and do all the things you need to do. And though she has had her share of volunteers, as most of you know, it always comes back to number one, and she has to lick the stamps and mail all of the things. They do a lot of things that she shouldn't have to at this point, but it needs to be done, and she does it. And I think that's the thing that I hear from most people, male or female, that are out really trying to move from one level to another. In one case, I spoke of a personal experience with Laurel Wick, but the idea of having someone in a management position who gets the phone calls, who says, I'd like to get who the biggest name you've got, or I'd like to do this, or I'd like to put on a festival, I'd like to do. Well, she does all that, but what else do you do?
What else do I do? Well, first I will tell you a little bit about the agency and about how my own career developed at the agency. In 1995, Ted Kurland Associates, which is the name of the company, celebrated its 20th anniversary in the industry. I was fortunate enough to be there the first day that it opened its doors, and started with the company as when it was an upstart company. Over the course of these 20 years, we have developed a roster and represented the top names in jazz. Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, Sonny Rollins, Chick Corea, Carla Bley, Pat Metheny. I cannot really list them all over the years, but we presently represent about 40 actively working jazz artists who have major record company contracts. It's been a great experience for me. I started out having been a college student, having earned a Bachelor of Science degree in speech pathology, languages, and audiology, and went to work for an upstart company because I needed to earn money to go and get the certifications that I needed to work in the allied health professions. So I started to work for Ted Kurland Associates. We had plywood desks and cinder blocks, and we basically started from scratch and built an agency. And today we probably have one of the largest agencies that's actually concentrating in this kind of music. I just wanted to say a little bit about the opportunities for women. And over the years, when was trying to think about what I would say about this, I found that I have to say that it's true that the male jazz artist has dominated our roster. Part of that had to do with the fact that we were concentrating on instrumental music. And Lorraine touched on this a little bit earlier. I think that women are starting to stretch out. Women jazz artists are not just vocalists or not just pianists anymore. We see more women jazz artists leading their own bands on saxophone and on drums. So I think what we find is a greater visibility now and acceptance for women leading their own groups on different kinds of instrumentation. So I think that there is a positive thing there. I think there is more visibility for women on the scene today. I think that in general, women are working more, especially those who are fortunate enough to have gotten to the point of getting a record deal and having a record contract. We have added women to the roster who are immensely talented. Nina Freelon being one of them, and she's a delight to work with and an honor to represent. But we've got artists now like Jerry Allen and Dee Dee Bridgewater, who are both part of this great celebration of women in jazz. And we hope to be able to continue adding more women to the roster so that opportunities are a little bit more widespread into the field for women. I think that at the point that the successes are made and that the record deals are made and that the deals and the bookings come down, that there isn't much difference between a woman jazz artist and a male jazz artist being able to get work. If the talent is there, if the media marketing machine is behind them with a major record company, then there are a lot of good working opportunities for women.
Thank you. One thing that has always fascinated me in terms of what happens when you have a roster such as yours, how do you handle someone who's new, who is not as well known as, say, Chick Corea or Miles Davis or somebody like that? Do you do anything special for them? Or do you have to do anything special?
The roster is concentrated more with the well-established names. The majority of the artists on the roster have already done all of that. However, we do take on one or two projects of that nature. Presently, we're working with Kurt Elling, who's a vocalist on Blue Note, who's a total unknown other than coming from Chicago, where I understand he's very well known and liked. And also Leroy Jones, who came out of the Harry Connick Jr. Big Band from New Orleans on trumpet and vocals. It's just a lot of pressing the flesh. It's just a lot of the same. It's when you have a record company at that level behind you, it's easier because you have a team, you have a lot of other people who are ready to, step in and give you tour support and services that you need in order to increase the visibility of the new artist. But you try some packaging, you try to put the artist on with your larger name artists, if you can possibly do that. And basically, as Nina was saying, we just don't go for the singular club engagement. We'll get out there in the university and college systems, and we'll go to the music departments. We might have developed 5 or 10 different people at at a singular university that we'll go to try to just place the artist so basically he can have a job and be seen.
People that you have contacted who actually in the university will hire the people. Is that what you
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The levels of buyers that we have are not just the nightclub owners and the major festival buyers. They're universities, music department heads, or the student government associations, or the Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs, and a lot of smaller towns do a lot of good community programming besides the bigger festivals that can handle it.
Thank you. Penny, you have taken great pride in really reaching out in the community and doing specific things in Chicago. What is special in your view about the direction that your festival takes, and the things that you do which are not necessarily connected with the festival, but we have to do with the business of the music?
I always tell people that I have 6 jobs. Now that my children are grown, I can afford to have 6 jobs. Only one of which pays me, though. The Chicago Festival is in its 18th year, and it's a wonderful example of people getting together who love the music. They aren't necessarily capable of playing the music, but that doesn't mean that they don't enjoy it just as much. And 20 years ago, I started presenting with my partner a series called Jazz at Noon that expanded to Jazz at 5. Those were all started because we were commercial interior designers. And we wanted to hear music, but we didn't want to stay out until midnight to hear it because we had to get up the next morning. So it's really what Nina's saying. I think that anything that you're going to do or you enjoy, you have to do it yourself, and you just get to it and work with it, and you can make it happen. That led to then owning a jazz club called Andy's in Chicago, and that's in its 20th year next year, where we feature all local musicians, but we try to give everybody a chance within the city. At that club, we started the whole concept of having a Chicago Jazz Festival. We went to the Park District and told the superintendent of parks, I was all prepared to argue with him because I thought he'd say no, that I was sick and tired of, since it's a free festival, the Grant Park Concert Society had free festivals there with a symphony, why couldn't we have a jazz festival there? And he told me that the only reason is because nobody's ever asked him. And I thought, well, so much for that, you know. And it was a good lesson to learn, because if you don't ask, you're never going to find out. You know, you really have to take the bull by the horns and go and do what your heart directs you to do. That started 18 years ago, this thing we call the Chicago Jazz Festival, and each summer we have over 200 to 350,000 people that come to this festival. We've survived 5 mayors and 9 different directors of special events within the city. And we will continue to survive because it's something we all believe in. Everybody who works on it is not paid. I chair a committee and have for 18 years with the Chicago Jazz Festival Committee, which is an outgrowth of the Jazz Institute of Chicago. And on that committee, we have journalists, we have musicians, we have just jazz lovers. There are only 3 women on that committee. We're in our 20th meeting of this year planning the festival. And we try to, as much as possible, to have these musicians and artists that come to town go into the schools, but unfortunately we're on Labor Day weekend and the schools aren't open at that time. So I've now started something else, and that is I am now the jazz coordinator at the Ravinia Festival, and Ravinia is the home of the summer home of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and I have the pleasure of working with a good friend of Billy's. Ramsey Lewis is our musical director. Jerry Mulligan was the director before that. And I get together with Ramsey and Zaran Mehta, who is our executive director, and we have a wonderful, wonderful festival on the July 4th weekend. We tried to do it in June, but unfortunately our basketball team is so good that we had playoffs all the time.
That's right.
And our audience was applauding at the wrong times. Earphones will do that. But we're now in our 5th season, and we have a great festival planned for this year, and an outgrowth of that job then, in brainstorming with Ramsey and with Zaran, we've started a jazz mentoring program, which is now in its 2nd year. And I selected 6 of what I thought were superior musicians in the Chicago area, but also had a knack of being able to relate and work with children. And we go into 10 inner city high schools in Chicago, and each one of those musicians makes 30 visits a school year. And out of that, we get 6 will form a jazz student septet that will then perform with their mentors at the festival. This year, we were able to get funding to be able to send all of the children to the Abersall camp, the jazz camp. And one of them was able to go last year, and it was a remarkable experience for her. She was our pianist, and she came back was so filled with confidence. I just loved it. It was wonderful. But I do that. We are starting a Rising Star series through Zaran Mehta at the DeSable Museum of African American History in Chicago. And we have a component at Ravinia, the Rising Star series, for classical musicians. And that's another thing, too. We bus the kids from Chicago out to the Rising Star series. I have our trumpet player, Orbert Davis, who gives a lecture before the concert to talk about the relationship between classical music and jazz. The kids are then able to ask the performers afterwards any questions that they'd like to, and they've all just really enjoyed it tremendously, so we'll continue that next year. The Rising Star series will feature students or young people 22 ages and younger. And it will be on Saturday afternoons after we have what my other job is, our concert series at Orchestra Hall. Ravinia has just taken over the Allied Arts series, and I have the pleasure of booking with Zarin all of the jazz performers, and we'll have a 10-concert series at Orchestra Hall. Last year was the first year that they featured as much jazz as they have, other than isolated dates, and their subscription base at that time was about 800, and it's grown to about 1,250 in a concert hall of 2,500 seats. So there's obviously every indication that there's a jazz audience out there, and we hope to fill it every single date of the 10 season dates that we have. I think we have always made having women a priority at our festival. I can't, and I'm now back to the Chicago Festival as well as Ravinia. In any work that I do, it's a priority. I think that in seeing the students that are coming up in the schools, and I try to get to as many as I can, I see far more young women becoming involved. I don't know that with the conditions of the world as they are today, that we won't see more be able to continue in the business. I think that's been certainly my experience, that we'll find an occasional bass player, and as a matter of fact, our bass player is a wonderful bass player, Marlene Rosenberg, who's toured with Joe Henderson and is a wonderful musician, and she's the mentor bass player. And the kids are always amazed when they see a woman on bass. They can't quite believe that that's a role for a woman. But I see more and more coming up in the schools, and part of what the mentors do while they're in the schools is to talk about the business of jazz, what made them get involved in jazz, and what made them continue, what to expect if that's what they choose, that's the avenue they choose to go. And I think it's been very helpful for these students. They're not afraid to ask questions, and at least they'll go in a little bit better prepared to know what the business is. One of the things that we encourage them to tell them is if they are serious about their music, don't give someone a tape that is so bad. And Laurel and I were talking earlier this morning is that we have shopping bags of tapes in our offices. I think all of us who are involved in this business of presenting listen to these tapes. I listen to every single one that comes in. I don't always get to it at the time that maybe the artist wants me to, but I do listen to every single one because I think it'd be wonderful to discover a new talent. I can't think of anything more exciting than finding a new talent. But I must tell you, with time limitations and the quality of the tapes that I receive, it's terrible. I can't imagine how anybody could pass on a tape that starts out with either muddled quality or a level where all of the instruments can't be heard or the voice can't be heard. The very first song you put on a tape, if you're going to send one, has to be something that's going to grab someone's ear and make them want to listen. It only makes sense. So if you're about sending tapes, please remember that. I try to always get back to everyone who calls or sends a tape, and I'm certainly not going to tell someone I don't think you can sing or play, but I do try to give as much advice as I can. I think that the Rising Stars series will help us be able to draw attention to artists that normally we can't feature. Even though we have a free festival with the Chicago Festival, we still have sponsors that want names there. They want bodies in the park. We have a little bit more of a liberty in featuring regional or unknown artists, but because there are not that many positions, we have 28 slots on this festival. There aren't that many, and we get over 75 to 150 tapes to fill those 28 slots. With the other venues, one is a 2,500 seat hall, the other is a 3,200 seat hall. All of those are ticketed events, and obviously the overhead, because we live in a very big union city, the overhead is enormous. So when you're booking, you have to think of filling those seats. In a subscription series type of a format, we can take a few more chances and have some emerging artists or rising stars. And that's what we really hope to do with the Orchestra Hall concerts. I think that's about it right now.
Most of you who are here have some vested interest in the business of music, so I'd like to open the floor. You've heard what each of the panelists is really into. And believe me, this is a capsule version of what they're into. They just gave you the tip of the iceberg. So if you have any questions, you can see that these are very knowledgeable women who have experience in many of the areas that you may or may not have experienced. So do we have any questions? Do you have any questions to specific people? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Tara Fennell. I go to the New School in New York. I don't know if you all ever heard of it.
Speak
but
up,
this
please.
is to Nina Freelon. I know that you studied with Yusef Lateef, and you got a grant to study with Yusef Lateef, and I know it's very important for vocalists to study with horn players a lot because it helps the improvisational side. I wanted to know what made you study with Yusef Lateef in particular, being that there's such an open market for many different horn players that you could have studied with. What made you choose Yusef Lateef? And what did you study with him?
I had a personal relationship. That's a good question, and thanks for asking it. I had a personal relationship with him that I met him at Jazz in July. And I was impressed with the fact that every time you saw Yusef, he was the same. Always calm, always centered. And the kinds of things that he would say, we would work in our combos, and the kinds of comments that he would give me made me feel that I wouldn't be intimidated in a teacher-student relationship with him. He would say things to me like, sing from your heart. Now that might not be the kind of critique that you could take home and say, okay, I'm going to really work on that. But it is something that made you think, sing from your heart. What does that mean? And if you asked him more questions to be more specific, he would give you the same answer. Sing from your heart. And that the heart, he had also a philosophy that the heart is the seat of the intelligence, not so much the mind. And I think intuitively I felt that as a singer also, that I was reaching for something that came from my soul, that came from a very deep and a very old place. So I felt a comfort level, first of all. And I felt just a little bit intimidated about writing a grant to study with anybody. But there are resources. You know, at my own, I live in North Carolina. I went to the State Arts Agency and asked for help. I also asked for copies of grants that had been successful so that I could see what that looked like, a yes, to help me write it out. And someone told me about the way the granting process worked, how to structure the grant and be very clear when you look at the requirements of the grant to make sure that you are in line with the granting procedures. In terms of what we studied, it was a lot of, Yusef has written a book called Repository of Scales, and we used that book as text. We also talked a lot about philosophy, because I think Yusef believes that if you have some construct, some framework that you're working from, it can inform and infuse your music without you having really to think about it, because you know where you're coming from. He opened my ears up to different scales that gave me more possibilities for improvisation, to be able to hear something differently. And because I have a pretty good oral memory, it was great to just try things over changes using scales, something that I had never done before. What I would do previously would be to pull snatches of other tunes that I knew and lay them over the changes, you know, in order to begin getting some ideas rolling. So it was a big, it was a humbling experience, because it was hard also. And most of the learning took place after. Most of the benefit, let me say, it's still bearing fruit. But the time that I spent with him has been very far-reaching in terms of what I'm able to bring to my music as a result of sharing with him.
Two things. The Jazz in July program is the jazz program at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and Yusef Lateef is on the faculty there. And so he's available to anyone who studies there, and he's a very open person who's very interested in singers. That particular program, because of our concerns on the faculty, I'm on the faculty there too, because of our concern, we insist on singers coming to prepared coming into, every group has at least 1 or 2 singers, usually depending on the size of the class that summer. The singer has to come to the rehearsal with his or her music, lead sheets in the key that that person is going to do. And so we explain to singers that it is very important. One of the reasons that musicians have such a low opinion of singers is because singers don't come prepared like that. I've had any number of singers, I say, famous singers, say, play such and such a tune. Okay, what key? I don't know, I don't, you know. And so, I mean, this is a world famous singer. So, you know, I say, right, okay, how about this one? And, and so, but that's not the, we try to teach the students that that's not the problem. You come and say, I sing it in G flat. You know, it's fine, that's okay, fine. You play the tune in G flat. You don't want it in F, you don't want it in G, you want it in G flat. You know, because that's where your voice is. Fine. Now it's my problem to play it where you want it. So, and that's the way it should be. I mean, you shouldn't have to settle for F or G. If your range is absolutely comfortable in that, fine, that's where it goes. So, but you have to know that in order to tell me or anybody else who's going to play for you. The other aspect of that is the idea of being a part of a unit, as Nina said. She really is she had the same preparation that any horn player here had. She's learning her scales and her chords and all that. And so she's not just pulling some phrases or something from somewhere else. She is doing the same process that the horn plays. Thereby, you earn the respect of that guy. Ella Fitzgerald can sing any horn player I know into the ground. I mean, and she's, if you don't believe it, listen to the record she did with Duke Ellington's band, where she traded fours with some of the best musicians in the field. Ran right in the ground. So, other questions? Yes?
One of the things,
right in the ground. So, other questions?
one of the things that I've noticed, of course, we've all had, when you're in high school band, half the people in there are girls, and then you get into college and yeah, they're still around. But by the time they get into the professional aspect, it's like, where'd they all go? You know. What I'm wondering about, Penny, is your work in the schools. Have you had a lot more success in encouraging women to stay in the field, to work to continue working in the professional aspect? And what do you tell them, and what kind of things do you do to encourage them?
I think it's happening. I really do. That's why part of what this mentoring is all about is not just how to play your instrument. We haven't started a vocal clinic yet, but we're going to do that next year. But with the young instrumentalists, there are a number of them that I've seen, and each time the musician goes into that classroom, he's by himself or she's by herself, and they speak about what to expect in the business and make sure that they understand so that it can encourage people to go into it. For the most part, the first question is, well, I don't see very many women out there making it. And it's generally because the women will just choose something else, or they fall in love, they get married, whatever. You have to be dedicated to anything that you're going to be doing in life. You're the only one that can make it happen. And you really have to love music. And generally, the students who really love music will come up and ask those questions. How long do you rehearse, of course, is the first one. And then the second one is, do you really think there's work out there for me? And every one of the mentors that go into the schools encourage the kids in the fact that yes, there is work if you play your instrument well, but if you don't, then there isn't any work for you. If you're willing to work with, it's a team. A band is a team, and if you can't play and be a member of that team, then it's not going to work. But nobody cares whether you're a girl or a boy or you're purple. As long as you can play, that's all they care about. They've encouraged the kids to come down to the club and play with them as well, because I think that girls are a little more timid in many instances about getting up in front of the public, and it's a terribly important part of mentoring is to let them know that there's going to be an audience there, and you can't play with your back to the wall. So I'm very encouraged. We're only in our second year, so I can't speak with that much authority at this point, but I am very, very encouraged by it. And I certainly will continue to see that we have more women out there as instrumentalists as well as vocalists.
Let me encourage those of you in the audience to ask specific questions. You have a very knowledgeable panel here who can tell you how to. So let me entertain some how-to questions, please. Yes.
As a performer, I often hear that, I don't know if different genre of music, if it applies to different genre of music, but the concept of touring. And I'd like to know, can you just give a brief how-to, for example, of not just in your local area, but if you want to go out of your city, and how would you find out where the clubs are and who the person is in charge? Is there a list? Do you just make calls? And what's the best thing? Do you send a tape along with the questioning letter, or should you call? But I guess basically I'm asking, from your experience, is touring a factor? And because the other aspect is of developing a following. How do you do that? And also, the other question is, there are a lot of open mics in the DC area that I perform in, but how do you develop a following? How do you make people loyal to you, other than, being a good performer and speaking to what they want to hear? Thank you.
You want to take part of that? Because I'm going to ask everybody else to.
That's
to
an
talk
excellent
to that.
that's an excellent question. I at this point am one member, I think a very important member of a team of people that work on getting opportunities for me, securing opportunities for me to perform. And Laurel might be able to speak a little more about her process, but I think from what I've observed from my end, first of all, you have to know how to do a budget, because it all comes down to being able to afford to tour. If you're invited somewhere to perform and are able to go there, if you can string other dates along in the same time period, and it's really like putting together pieces of a puzzle, because where someone may like to have you in Ohio, and you have another gig, let's say, in a town that's several hours away, they may not want to have you the same week that you're at the other date. So it is somewhat of a logistical kind of thing. You also ask about how you make people or encourage people to be loyal to you. You have to first be loyal to yourself. You have to first really work on, that's homework. That's not anything that's done on the bandstand. That is homework. And really look inside and see what it is that you yourself have to offer that is unique in all of the world, in all the universe, and be very centered and very confident in that space, and you will become a magnet for the audience that you need. And also be willing to reach out to those people who do come. I always thank people for coming to hear live music, because they could stay home. They could watch television, they could listen to my recordings, but coming out takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of energy. And so I'm always very careful to, always conscious to thank the people that do take the trouble and take the time to come out and share, because the audience and the artist, that's a mystical, magical, wonderful thing to be able to stand on this side of the microphone and share what's in your heart and from the bandstand with people that are total strangers to you. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. I think, maybe Laurel could speak about the touring part.
Okay.
I think that if you are an artist who is at the level with not having a record company behind yourself yet, and you want to get out there and get your name around, what you need to do is concentrate on your home base, start there, and then try not to jump too fast. Try not to think that you need to be touring in Europe or you need to be touring nationally. Try to think about developing your region. Even start with just your state and go to various communities in your state. And try to work a lot, even if you're not making a lot of money. Just doing the actual act of working will bring you fans. And then you definitely should begin to take a mailing list. Bring a card with you, ask people to fill it out. Develop a one-page newsletter. Keep in touch with people. let people know that you're remembering them, that they came to see you. So you'll build up your grassroots. Think of your hometown as your nucleus, and then you build up the whole cell structure until finally you'll find yourself in a town, in a place where you'll either collaborate with an artist who's a little more established, who can help you along just a little bit more, or hopefully meet somebody who can help you along in your career. But have realistic expectations, and don't put too much pressure on yourself to think that, why aren't I playing in LA right now, you know? And realize that that will come as your career develops.
Benny?
Yeah, I think that I see this on a club level. I think that the most successful individuals who arrive in a town and they don't know anybody or they don't know how to go about it, there are two things. Willard Jenkins, who I see in the audience, has put together a wonderful, with the National Jazz Service Organization, a wonderful guide to all the clubs that are in every town just about across the United States. Your regional arts organizations can assist you in that too. As it is in my area, it's Arts Midwest. And they have a list of all of the clubs, all of the jazz societies, anything involved with jazz they can tell you about. But you must get out there and spread the word that, hey, I'm here, and I'm looking for work, and I'd love to work anywhere, and I'll work with you. So, but I get in touch with the arts agencies and find out where those places are, and then get out there and do it.
Lorraine, you took a special interest in a man whose career was considered over by many people, even though he at that time was working in a show, Jabo Smith.
Oh, yeah.
How did you, what did you do? It might be practical, some of the things you did to make people aware of the fact that this was a saleable entity might be helpful to some of the ladies.
I don't know what I really did, because it came as a shock to me. I thought Jabo Smith was dead. Everyone thought he died a million times over. But I was born in Newark, New Jersey, and Jabo Smith was playing in that town when I was 16 years old. And I used to go with the kids from the Newark Hot Club to a black club called the Alcazar to hear Jabo, because even as kids, and we were record collectors, we knew that that was a great artist. And then, you know, 2 marriages later and a nightclub later, I forgot about Jabo. And one day I was reading the newspaper at home on a Sunday, and I see an announcement, one more time at the Village Gate, guest artist Jabo Smith. I almost fainted. I couldn't believe it. So I called what was left of the Newark Hot Club, and we headed right to I live around the corner practically from the gate. And there was this fabulous show that Vernell Bonaris did about New Orleans. I think it was one of the best shows ever. And terrific women singing in that show. And there was Jabo up on the stage blowing this incredible trumpet. I mean, it literally brought tears to my eyes to hear what I've missed for so long, because a lot of the great guys are dead. Well, we went backstage after to try to talk to him, and did he remember us? Not at all. And he was very suspicious of us anyway. What did we want with him? Well, we lured him over to my house, and we was in between shows, and unfortunately I gave him a brandy to drink. I shouldn't have done that. I lost track of him. But in any event, we became friends from there on out. So for 12 years, I helped him get back a little bit of his past reputation, helped him play again, took him to Chicago, went all over Europe with him. I mean, he was like our child, you know. He came to all the dinners, Thanksgiving and holidays, and my whole family kind of took care of Jabo, but I had to take care of him until the very end, which was very sad. Oh, and he did play at the Vanguard, and he sang with the big band, Mel Lewis' band at the time, and of all people, Don Cherry fell in love with him. Well, you know, Don Cherry is way out there, and Jabo's over here. But Don was wonderful because he examined all aspects of jazz. So he got Jabo into his group. You see, that's what they're saying. Come down the club, let someone hear you. And Don heard him, and he said, would you like a job? And he did play with Don, and then we went to Germany with that whole group, and it was just beautiful. But yeah, Jabo, well, he died in '91, unfortunately. However, what I want to say, though, about being in the club position is that, and if you love jazz, I'm in a position, I explore jazz everything I've ever loved and what's left of it in this world. And I got tired of the young lions, and I went out and found some old ones who you may not remember. Well, I mean, I had Mary Osborne. She was living in California. Who knew Mary Osborne? I knew her as a kid, guitar. I got her to come in. I lured her because she had almost stopped playing. She was very ill. I didn't know that. It was her last date, but it was so beautiful. Then I tried to find Jerry Southern. She died before I could get to her. But Duke Ellington had a big birthday some years back. 2 years ago, I found Herb Jeffries. Got him to come in from California. 82, he sang like the earliest days. It was just gorgeous. So I found 2 more old lions, and one of them actually called me from London, who was not particularly a jazz artist, but he's a great harmonica player, although he'll say mouth organ. His name is Larry Adler. And he is coming to the Vanguard May 12th for only 3 nights, doing an all Gershwin show with a beautiful young singer from England who I've never met. Her name is Paulette Ivory. We'll figure out what that's about. I got him a couple of New York musicians to sit in. But I had 3 more days to fill out, and I found my favorite old lion, Jay McShann. He's coming for 3 days. So I'm saying there's a lot of artists that I care about who are no longer in major spotlights, but they're part of jazz history. And where I can find them and love them, I try to get them. And all the young kids should come and hear these great old people.
That's right.
You have actually done some things, Colby, which I think work for many of the people who are emerging in New York. Would you share some of that with this group?
I think I've worked with every emerging artist in New York, but they're famous today. A lot of them are famous today.
How'd they
But,
get that way?
As they work with me, within a year or 2, they've already spread their wings and they're flying off. And I'm only one of a lot of resources that they have. Jazzmobile, there's a lot of other resources. I'm only one, but I'm only speaking about what I do. And so I start them off with everything that's been said here, that if you're not known, who's going to hire you? Lorraine can't hire you if you bring in 3 people. Penny can't hire you if she's never even heard your name, and you send that terrible cassette, which you said, this is not my best cassette, but, you know, no, don't send it. And if you don't go to all the seminars and conferences, we had so many seminars and conferences. I think we were, remember the ones we did on the National Endowment, writing an application to the National? I think from New York started the big splurge of all the artists submitting applications. And so you have to come to them, and you have to listen to everything that everyone says, because they're all true. You have to do these things. You have to make your name known. When you're at the Village Vanguard, Billy Harper said, can I sit in that? Wait, kid. Can I sit in that? Wait, kid. Can I sit in? And then finally he sits in. Great. And pretty soon, before you know it, he was in the band. Or Ricky Ford, Village Vanguard. And or you have to sit in. If you hear something happening, you have to say, I would love to take part. Is there space? Your name has to be out there everywhere you go. This is my free mailing list with your big name on the top, name, address, please print, and zip code. And you have to do all these things. If you get a gig, wonderful, you have a gig. It's at a small place. But why are you doing the gig if it's, and many of my emergings are still working for $250 a night. Okay, what are you doing it for, other than the pleasure of playing and the pleasure of playing your own music, if you don't have someone there? So the press list, the PSAs, the listings are different from press release, remember. And all of these things, all of you know. I'm so sorry to be saying everything that you all know. But every time you can sit in anywhere. So, and if you're a side person now, you can be a leader tomorrow. So check out what your own leader does. But every leader I work with doesn't do a lot of things. I'm amazed at what you've done. And so all these things you must learn as a leader to do. So sit in everything, take advantage of everything. Do you know about all the grants you could write for as a personal individual musician? By the way, the 16 women's jazz festivals we did were not funded. Nothing, no funding. And we had top sound people. Do you have a good sound equipment? Is your piano going to be tuned? I mean, check all those things out. You know, what kind of help will the place give me? Is my name going to be listed? Where's my name listed? All these things as an emerging artist, You have to make your name known. Take in your good little tape recorder at first and tape everything you do. Can't you see all the established artists still tape everything they do in this little tape recorder? Take it home and listen to see what they did. And they take it home and listen to it, check themselves out. Are you doing that? You know, everything you do, are you taping that? And then if you can, and someone says, I have a recording situation where you can come in and do a demo for $200, get that $200 and do that demo. Make sure it's really good and get more than you pay for. Always try to get more than you pay for. And you can ask for everything. If you do a concert at the Schomburg, they've got a tape, and they've got a videotape and audio tape. Did you ask for your copies?
Yeah.
And they never send them. So did you call 14 or 15 times like I did? I mean, you have to keep calling and calling, you know, so. And when you sent something to the record company, did it come saying come back to you saying unsolicited, not even open? So make friends. I remember C.B. Bullard at Atlantic. I remember George Butler. Whatever went on between the musicians and George Butler, he was wonderful to me. And they helped us out in many, many occasions. And so you have to take advantage of every friend you meet. Is every person here on the panel now on your personal mailing list? Are you going to send them notices of whenever you perform? Are you going to send them that one-page newsletter that you're going to say, every time you perform, send everybody on your VIP mailing list the information of what you're doing. Every single thing you do. Hi, I just wanted to let you know. Okay?
I had a hand. Oh, yeah, oh, here she is. Yeah, okay.
Hi, I'm Rachel Lewis, and I'm Director of National Promotion for Verve Records. And my question is directed to Laurel Wicks. But first, I wanted to say to Laurel that I first met you 10 years ago at a convention for the National Association for Campus Activities when I was booking the UCLA Jazz Festival. And I was very impressed by what you were doing and the way you articulated yourself. And 10 years later, I still remember you as being a very striking role model. And now I'm at Verve. And anyway. But my question has to do with, of the marketing tools that record companies do provide, or do our best to provide, whether it's radio airplay or print media or television publicity or internet stuff, or in some cases video, what is the most important to you as a booking agent? We tend to think in terms of just how to sell records and how to develop an artist's image, but I'd like to hear what of the things that we provide help you in your efforts the most. And then putting a different spin on that for some of the folks in the room that don't have record company deals, what can they learn from that or emulate from that, even though they don't have the resources available to them from the major record companies?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, thank you for reminding me about that. I'm always amazed at the people that I've worked with over the years who have graduated from programs who were the directors of student activities for their colleges, and now they are in positions of power and great contributors to the industry. And I used to remember everybody's name.
Yeah.
But now I have so many people who tell me stories like that, so it's a pleasure. But the basic things are needed. They're the same for emerging artists as they are for established artists. It's really amazing to me. Of course, Verve doesn't do this, but getting a beautifully printed press kit that has been Xeroxed or copied that you can read it's amazing how many of the majors just can't even get that together. A printed press kit with very specific one-line blurbs that, you know, a club owner can say, what should I say about this artist in a half a second or less? Something that's just going to really grab you about the artist, so that a buyer doesn't have to read through mounds and mounds and mounds of paper to be able to express in a small amount of time what it is they're trying to sell and what it is they're trying to market. When the agency first started, and I started to put together a printed brochure, and we take a little photograph of all the artists, and we get 56 characters per line in 8 lines, Now, what can you possibly say about Miles Davis or John McLaughlin or anybody in that amount of space? But that's what is really important to be able to express in a bullet like that. There are certain parts of the media that are seemingly driven by itself. For certain types of jazz, there isn't anything that I can do to get more radio airplay on a smooth jazz station for an artist like Carla Bley. And it's a constant battle that never, you know, the track never seems to have two rails. But we take advantage of those tools if we have them there and they're available. Electronic press kits are really popular now. And EPK, you put it on, it has a little bit of spoken word about an artist. It has a little bit of video footage. So if a buyer has community TV available for marketing, they can take a clip from that. Very few artists have that available. But if it's there, very few artists have a beautiful color slide available. And in the last probably 10 years, most major newspapers will do color on their entertainment section. So you cannot get the front cover of your local entertainment section if you do not have something as simple as a color slide. So we advise our managers and our artists, if they're self-managed or whatever, you know, get yourself a nice color slide. Basically, the larger record companies do a great job. We're, you know, getting all the teams together and handling, getting the TV exposure is probably, in today's day and age, you know, one of the most important avenues of becoming known. Of course, Dr. Taylor has done miracles with that over the years, 4 years. And now what's really exciting is the internet. And we're making our deals in cyberspace now. I come to work and many colleges from over the country have just sent me a message asking for who's available for their event. I don't even have to talk to people anymore. That's scary.
Yes.
Sorry, you next.
I have a question. What if you are a person who, I'm a saxophone player, and I used to play in high school and play every now and then, but I also got caught up in the corporate world. I'm a computer program analyst now, and I want to switch from computers to music. So what kind of advice do you have for someone who's used to making a certain amount of income? But their heart really is into, they want to get into music now, so it's kind of hard paying rent and that kind of eating every day. And so what kind of advice do you have for a person who wants to get into that field?
No, you have to, there's no easy answer to that as an artist, because those of us who have worked at a job and then had to do music on the side realize that you can't really do it that way for a long period of time. I was a disc jockey for about 12 years, and I continued to play. Well, in order to be a successful disc jockey, I listened to every track on every record that I ever played on the radio. I mean, if it was, whatever it was, I knew before it went on, I knew everything that was on that record, you know. So, at least for my own purposes. And I knew how I was going to program. That took a lot of time. That took practice time that I would have spent at the piano. So I had to learn how to practice fast, how to get a whole lot done in a very short time, you know, and because I was still performing. I was playing at the Hickory House when I was doing this thing. So I didn't want to practice on the gig. I wanted to go to that gig as well prepared as I was on my radio gig, or better, if you know. So you really have to divide your time. You have to survive. First of all, you have to survive as an artist. You have to survive as a human being, and then you have to determine how can I balance these things, because it's up to you as to the money. You can't do it with money in mind. You have to do it with some feeling of, I'm prepared not to make X amount of money. Hopefully I will make what I need down the line. But if you go in it saying, I must have X amount of dollars from this, you're doomed to failure in that part of what you're doing, because you can't guarantee that, unfortunately.
Okay, and also, she was talking about focusing more on the younger women as far as getting up and going to a place to play and that kind of thing. But suppose you haven't been playing for a while, what kind of things can you work on so you can get up and go into places and make a good impression?
Specifically, I would suggest that you get the Jamie Aebersold play-along books and records, because you're playing with a good rhythm section, you're playing the kind of tunes that you'll be playing on those kind of gigs, and you can practice at your own, whatever time or whatever place you have, and you can get your technique to the place where you won't be embarrassed when you go on the bandstand.
Okay. All right, thank you.
We had another question.
Thank you. Thank you. My question, I guess anyone that's willing to address it can, and that is, are there any strategies being discussed or devised to make the mainstream industry more receptive to jazz? I would like to hear Nina Freelon on the radio more. I would like to see maybe a jazz awards program on a network. How can we make mainstream embrace jazz the way, say, the country western genre has been able to do? Thank you.
I don't know. That's a really good. I will say I think there is some movement in that direction. It does seem like jazz has been looked at as a sort of a niche part of music, a small part. But Bet on Jazz and the new programming that's on TV, I think that's a new development, and that they are definitely showcasing artists on the mainstream jazz arena.
I think also developing audiences by going into the schools as jazz artists. Those of you who play the horn, and this sister right here who's just getting started to come back into the business, to take your music, to develop audiences. These children, by the time they hear jazz music, their musical tastes have already crystallized and they've already decided they don't like jazz, whatever it is. So we have to get to them early. I have a program I started at Duke University Medical Center called Baby Song. I get them when they're right out of the womb. Developing audiences and really not believing the lie that it's a very narrow market and only a few people. I mean, I've sung to third graders who, where can I get that tune, Come Rain or Come Shine? They're asleep by the time this music is played on most radio programs, late at night. They have no access to it. So there's nothing not to like. But the artist is the ambassador. It's not so much about what I can do with my instrument, whatever that is. It's about who I am also, to reach out and touch you, to say that I've actually met a woman who plays the bass, a woman who plays the drums, a woman who plays the tenor saxophone, is something that makes a direct impression on a young mind and can change lives. You're really a role model, and if you just wait for them to come and see you in the club, they're 20 years old by then, 18. You have to go where they are early and help to develop audiences, and it is a very slow building block kind of process, individual by individual. Can I add onto that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, it doesn't hurt to write letters
I was
either.
just gonna
You
say
know,
that.
I mean, I think everybody is open to this. They took Bravo off the air in our area, and we sent out a message through our Jazzgram at the Jazz Institute, and it's back on now.
Sure.
But I think that you can call disc jockeys. If you know any disc jockeys, call them. Suggest some things that they can play. Everybody's open to suggestions. We have a smooth jazz station in Chicago, which I'd rather not get into, but we reminded them that there are a few things that might fit on that station that are real jazz, and the disc jockeys were very open to it and now play some more that are, I mean, it's coming. It's a very slow process, but you can't sit back and let it happen. You've got to help. And I think that if you write letters, they listen to them. If you call, I found out from the TV station that all those calls are monitored. They have to be because the federal government requires it. So that your call is not going to go unheard. And if you get enough people together, you can be heard.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just
Go ahead.
briefly, I've had a running battle with the New York Times for a long time not about the Vanguard, just about jazz in general. You pick up that New York Times Arts and Leisure, every single day there are 3 or 4 photographs about dance of every single kind, which is okay, I love dance. Movies are first there all the time. They have the cooking, they have a whole children's section, they have the book section, they have every single section devoted to human interest except jazz. An occasional write-up by, there are 2 critics. One is strictly rock and pop, and the other sometimes gets a job to do a jazz review of anything. I write to them all the time, and when I get really frustrated, something good happens. I've noticed a new column now in the Times that's reviewing records every so often, which they really never did before. It's on the sideline. And I just say that's very important to keep the newspapers on their toes, because they have a tendency to think all music is pop, and jazz is some little thing over on the side. But you do have to work on it.
Well, I'd like to thank, and I'd like for you to join me in thanking this very fine panel. I hope that these women have served as a beacon for you to show you that many things not only can be done, but are being done. These are but a few of the many women who are very active in the field, doing some wonderful things. We don't know enough about them, so I hope that in the course of the next, today and tomorrow, you'll be able to really interact with some of the people that you may identify, and I hope if you just look at the little signs on everybody, that you'll find people that are people that you've read about, heard about, and would like to talk with. You'll find most of the people here very accessible. We have another one of these tomorrow. We have a jam session coming up in about 20 minutes, and I hope those of you who feel like playing will come down and listen and participate in that, and of course come to tonight's concert. Thank you very much.
Okay.